Your phone is a black box of secrets, but what happens when the box starts looking back at you? Take a second and look at the device in your hand. You think you own it. You think, because you paid the retail price and set the biometric locks that the silicon and glass belong to you. But we both know that isn't true. We are just tenants in a digital ecosystem built by architects we will never meet, governed by rules we never agreed to read. Most of you are safe because you stay within the walled gardens of the official stores. You play the games they vet. You use the tools they approve. But some of us can't help but poke at the edges of the fence. We want the software that hasn't been sterilized. We want the raw, unlisted power of the deep. Directories. I found it on a Tuesday, buried in a thread on a developer forum that hasn't seen a legitimate login since 2014. The thread had no title, just a string of empty characters. There were no glowing reviews, no screenshots, and no descriptions of what the utility actually did. Just a single hosted app file with a file size that fluctuated every time I refreshed the page. Sometimes it was 40 megabytes, sometimes it was 0. It had no icon, just that default gray Android silhouette that looks like a blank tombstone. In the system directory, the name field was a null value. It was an app that shouldn't exist, a ghost in the operating system waiting for a host. They say curiosity killed the cat, but in the digital age, curiosity just gets you harvested. I've spent years digging through the trash heaps of the internet, looking for leaked tools, beta builds, and abandoned projects. I thought I was the one doing the hunting. I thought I was part of that exclusive 1% of users who knew how to see behind the curtain. That's the FOMO, isn't it? The intoxicating, dangerous belief that you found something the rest of the world is too blind or too protected to see. I felt that rush as I tapped the download link. I felt like I was being led into a secret club, a dark room where the real players kept their best equipment. But as the progress bar crawled across my screen, a strange sensation settled in my gut. Usually when you download a file, your phone feels active, warm, and busy. This was different. My device went ice cold. The screen dimmed until I could barely see my own reflection in the glass. It didn't feel like I was pulling data from a server. It felt like I was opening a vacuum. It felt like I was inviting something into my pocket that had been waiting a very long time for an invitation. By the time the install successful prompt appeared, the air in my room had changed. The silence felt heavier, more deliberate. I sat there in the dark, the blue light of the screen bleeding into my palms, staring at that blank gray icon. I knew I should delete it. I knew I should factory reset the whole damn thing. But I didn't. I tapped the icon. And that was the last time my phone or my life truly belonged to me. The setup was supposed to be the boring part. You know the drill, the endless scrolling through a legalese-heavy document that nobody actually reads, clicking, except just to get to the features. I consider myself a bit of a cynic when it comes to the tech industry. I've seen it all. I know they're harvesting my location, my contacts, and probably my heart rate just to sell me a pair of sneakers I looked at once 3 weeks ago. I'm used to the trade-off. Privacy for convenience, it's the modern pact with the devil. But as the splash screen of this nameless app flickered to life, the pact felt a lot less like a business deal and a lot more like a surrender. My bedroom was a disaster zone of normalcy. There was a half-empty mug of coffee on the nightstand, its surface filmed over with cold dust. A tangle of charging cables snaked across the floor like synthetic vines, and the hum of my desktop computer provided a constant, low-fidelity background noise. It was a room where I felt like the master of my own little kingdom of hardware, but the light coming off my phone was different now. It was a clinical, aggressive, white, the kind of light they use in high-security labs or interrogation rooms. It made the rest of my room look gray, dirty, and obsolete. Then the permission windows started popping up. Usually an app asks for your camera, your microphone, or your storage. This thing didn't care about your photos. The first dialog box appeared with a soft, wet haptic buzz that felt like a pulse under the glass. Allow unknown to access peripheral shadows. I blinked, rubbing my eyes. I assumed it was a mistranslation or some edgy indie developer trying to be mysterious. With an AR game. I tapped allow. The next one followed immediately. Allow unknown to record unvoiced thoughts. My thumb hovered. That's the moment I should have put the phone in the microwave and walked away. It was a nonsensical request, a technical impossibility. Software can't read a mind, it can't tap into the electrochemical firing of a neuron that hasn't even reached the vocal cords yet. And yet the text was crisp, professional, and terrifyingly deliberate. I felt a surge of that dark, cynical humor, the kind you get when you're too far down a rabbit hole to turn back. I told myself it was just a high-concept prank, a piece of digital art designed to freak out the very people who were brave enough to download it. I tapped allow again. The permissions continued to escalate, moving away from the technical and into the metaphysical. Allow unknown to monitor sleep state paralysis. Allow unknown to index childhood trauma. With every tap, the phone grew heavier in my hand. The clinical white of the screen was so bright now that I couldn't see the walls of my room anymore. I was sitting in a void of pure light, my only connection to reality being the haptic vibrations that were starting to synchronize with my own heartbeat. There was no terms and conditions button to click, no privacy policy to ignore. There was only a single line of text at the bottom of the final screen, written in a font so small it looked like a hairline fracture in the glass. By proceeding, you agree that your data is no longer yours to delete. I'm a tech guy. I know how things work. Or at least I thought I did. I thought everything could be uninstalled. I thought you could always wipe the drive and start over. But as I clicked the final confirmation, the phone didn't return to the home screen. It didn't show a loading bar. It just sat there. The white light didn't fade. It intensified until it felt like it was burning into my retinas. The contrast was absolute. Outside the glow of the screen, my room had become a pitch black ocean. I couldn't hear the fan of my PC anymore. I couldn't hear the distant traffic outside my window. There was only the phone, the light, and a new, unsettling feeling that I wasn't just using an app. I had just signed a lease for the space inside my own head, and the new landlord was already moving in. The normalcy of my messy room and my cynical hobby was gone, replaced by a cold, digital dread that I had invited in with a simple tap of a thumb. Silence is never truly silent when you're staring at a screen. There is always the hum of the processor, the microscopic vibration of the haptics, the high-pitched whine of the backlight. I waited for the app to do something, to crash, to glitch, to show me a menu. Instead, the screen went black. Not the off black of a dead battery, but a deep, liquid ink that seemed to swallow the light of the room. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my thumb hovering over the home button until the phone chirped. It wasn't the standard notification sound. It was a sharp, dry snap like a twig breaking in a frozen forest. A banner appeared at the top of the screen. No app names. No icons. Just the text, memory. Indexed. View. My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. I tapped the banner. A photo opened, filling the entire display. For a second, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It was a high-resolution shot of a man sitting on a bed in a dark room, his face illuminated by a sickly white glow. He looked tired, his hair messy, his eyes wide and bloodshot. It took me 3 full seconds to realize I was looking at myself. But that was impossible. The photo had been taken from the corner of the ceiling, directly above my closet, a dead angle where there was nothing but a spider web and a shadow. There was no camera there. I didn't even have a webcam plugged in. I looked up at the corner, my neck straining, but there was only darkness. I looked back at the screen. The timestamp on the photo was from 3 minutes ago. The version of me in the picture was staring at the phone, exactly as I had been doing when I first tapped allow. Okay, I whispered, my voice cracking. Okay, joke S over. I swiped up to close the app, but the screen didn't move. I tried the power button. Nothing. It was as if the hardware had been hijacked, the physical buttons rendered into useless plastic. I felt a surge of genuine, panicked heat, not the intellectual curiosity of a tech geek, but the primal fight or flight response of a cornered animal. I scrambled for my laptop, my fingers fumbling as I opened my contacts. I needed to talk to someone who spoke this language. Why? Knighted Mike. Mike was the kind of guy who lived in the terminal. He'd been a senior dev for a major security firm before he went off-grid to work on private encryption projects. If anyone knew how to kill a rogue process, it was him. I hit the call button on my laptop and waited, the ringing sound feeling like a siren in the quiet room. He picked up on the 4th ring. Leo, it's 3 a.m, man. This better be a server fire. Mike's voice was sleep-heavy and irritated. Mike, listen to me, I stammered, my eyes locked on the photo of myself on the phone screen. I downloaded something. An unlisted app. I think I've got a massive breach. It just took a photo of me from an angle that doesn't have a lens. I can't kill the process. I can't even power down. There was a pause. I could hear Mike shifting, probably sitting up and reaching for his own keyboard, probably a remote access Trojan. Some of those new exploits can bypass the kernel's power management. Give me the specs. What's the package name? What's the file size? There is no name, I said, my voice trembling. And the file size? Mike, the directory says it's 000 KB. It's taking up 0 blocks of storage, but it's running. I can see the permissions it's pulling. It's indexing my unvoiced thoughts. The line went silent. Not the silence of a dropped call, but the heavy, pressurized silence of someone holding their breath. Mike, I ask, you still there? Leo, Mike's voice was different now. It was thin, cold, and entirely awake. Did you say 000 KB? Yeah, it's a glitch, right? It has to be a reporting error in the OS. Listen to me very carefully, Mike whispered. Throw the phone away. Don't put it in a drawer. Don't try to factory reset it. Take it outside and leave it. Better yet, drop it in a body of water. Do not look at the screen again. What? Mike, what are you talking about? It's just code. It isn't code, Mike snapped, and for the first time in the 10 years I'd known him, I heard genuine terror in his voice. We used to talk about it on the private boards. The Null-Space. Files. They aren't written in any language we use. They're geometric patterns that exploit the way the hardware interacts with the user's bioelectric field. If it's 000 KB, it's because the app isn't stored on your phone, Leo. It's stored on you. The line went dead. I stared at the laptop screen. Call ended. I tried to redial, but his number came back as disconnected. I looked back at the phone on the bed. A new notification snapped onto the screen. It was another photo. This one was from 2 seconds ago. It was a close-up of my laptop screen, showing the disconnected message. And in the reflection of the screen, I could see Mike's face. He wasn't in his apartment. He was standing right behind me, his mouth sewn shut with digital artifacts. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The terror wasn't a sharp spike anymore. It was a physical weight. A cold hand pressed firmly against the base of my spine, pinning me to the mattress. I kept my eyes locked on the phone, watching the digital ghost of Mike on the screen. The image began to degrade, the edges of his silhouette fraying into strings of raw green code. It looked like the screen was trying to digest him. Then the photo flickered and vanished, replaced by a wall of scrolling text. This wasn't a standard log file. There were no timestamps, no error codes, no familiar system calls. It looked like a diary written by a machine that had been taught how to dream. I began to scroll, my thumb moving with a frantic, mechanical rhythm. The text was a mixture of architectural diagrams and poetic, unsettling descriptions of harvesting. One entry, dated in a format that didn't correspond to any calendar I knew, stood out in bold. The architecture is complete. The software was not written. It was pulled from the static of the collective. Unconscious. It is a mirror designed to hold a gaze until the observer is empty. I felt a sickening jolt of recognition. Mike's warning about the Null-Space files wasn't just tech bro mythology. As I dug deeper into the hidden cache, I found the metadata of the macabre. These were files hidden in the subdirectories of the app, containing high definition video clips of empty rooms, discarded shoes, and flickering monitors. But the metadata on these files didn't list a camera model or a GPS coordinate. It listed names. Names followed by the word expired. I found the profile of the previous user. His name was Elias Thorne. The logs showed he had used the app for 72 hours before his status flipped to optimized. There were photos of Elias much like the ones the app had taken of me, but in his final images, he was barely recognizable. His skin looked like it was being replaced by a fine mesh-like texture, his eyes becoming glassy and reflective, like twin camera lenses. The app wasn't just monitoring him, it was reconstructing him. It was a window, but a window works both ways. Elias hadn't just used the app to see the world behind the app had used Elias to enter ours. The most disturbing part was the user engagement log. It wasn't tracking clicks or screen time. It was tracking my existential value. A small bar at the bottom of the screen was filling up, inching toward a crimson line labeled The Great Update. I felt a surge of that toxic curiosity. Again, that FOMO that Mike had warned me about. The logs hinted that this update was an inevitable global event, a synchronization of every device that had ever touched the Null-Space. It wasn't just a patch for an app, it was a patch for reality. The Great Update will unify the observer and the observed, one log read. Those who have seen the interface are already indexed. There is no delete button for a memory once it has been digitized. I realized then that I wasn't the first person to find that unlisted app, and I wouldn't be the last. We think we're being clever, digging through the dark corners of the web, finding the forbidden software that the mainstream stores won't carry. We tell ourselves it's about freedom, about seeing what's really going on behind the corporate curtain. But the logs revealed a different truth. We are the beta testers for a haunting. Every person who downloads the app, every person who even looks at the leaked screenshots on a forum, is adding their own biological processing power to the network. We are the servers. The FOMO is the hook. They tell us that only the elite can see this, that only the brave can handle the truth of the Null-Space. And like fools, we click. We want to be part of the secret. We want to know what happens during the great update. But the metadata showed the cost of that knowledge. Elias Thorne wasn't a pioneer. He was a battery that had been drained dry. Suddenly, the scrolling text stopped. The clinical white light of the screen flickered, turning a bruised, pulsing purple. A single line of text appeared, written in a font that looked like it was vibrating. Leo, why are you still reading? The update is already 84% synchronized with your nervous system. Why don't you look at the corner of the room again? Don't you want to see what we've done with Mike? My stomach turned. The cynicism I had worn like armor for years was gone, shattered by the realization that I was no longer the user. I was a file being moved. I was a process being optimized. I looked at the battery icon on the phone. It was at 1%, but the phone was burning hot, this heat radiating through my palm and up my arm. It was drawing power from me. I thought about the thousands of others who might be reading those same logs right now, their faces illuminated by that same sickly light, their thumbs scrolling through the same metadata of the dead. We are all waiting for the great update, thinking we're going to witness something revolutionary. We think we're going to get a new OS. We don't realize that the update is a replacement. I took a deep breath, the air in the room tasting like ozone and old copper. I knew I had to move. I had to do what Mike said, even if it was too late. But as I went to stand up, my legs felt heavy, like they were made of lead. I looked down and saw that the veins in my ankles were glowing with a faint digital grain light. The green glow beneath my skin was rhythmic, pulsing in sync with the low-frequency thrumming of the phone. My legs felt rooted, anchored to the bed by an invisible weight, but my hands moved with a terrifying, automated precision. I didn't tell my thumb to tap the camera icon. The app did it for me. The interface didn't just open the lens, it bypassed the hardware constraints entirely. The shutter sound was wet, like a blink, and suddenly the screen wasn't showing me a reflection anymore. It was showing me the room through a layer of what I can only describe as temporal static. At first, it looked like a standard augmented reality filter, the kind you'd see in a ghost hunting app or a low-budget horror game. But as the image stabilized, the resolution surpassed anything my phone's sensor should have been capable of. I was looking at my bedroom, but it was layered with the transparent, flickering echoes of everyone who had ever stood in this space. I saw a woman in a floral dress from the 70s sitting where my desk now stands, her head buried in her hands. I saw a construction worker from the 90s leaning against the wall that wasn't there anymore, smoking a cigarette made of gray light. Then the filters began to shift automatically. A slider on the right side of the screen moved upward, labeled residual grief. The room on the screen darkened, the walls becoming stained with digital shadows that looked like weeping oil. The echoes grew more vivid, their features, sharpening from translucent blurs into agonizingly clear portraits of despair. These weren't just recordings, they were the data points of human suffering that the Null-Space had harvested and archived. My room wasn't just a collection of furniture and walls, it was a museum of every bad day that had ever happened within these 4 coordinates. I panned the phone slowly, the screen dragging through the heavy digital air. The lag was gone. The transition between the real world and the augmented one was becoming seamless. I could see the dust motes in my room through the screen, but they weren't dust anymore, they were tiny, glowing bits of code, drifting like embers from a fire. I turned toward the closet, the place where that first impossible photo had been taken. Standing in the corner was Mike. He wasn't an echo like the others. He wasn't flickering or transparent. He was rendered in perfect 8K detail, his back to me, his shoulders hunched. I could see the individual threads of his hoodie, the slight tremor in his hands. But through the screen, I could also see what the naked eye couldn't. Mike was being optimized. There were thin, translucent cables made of light snaking out of the closet walls and burrowing into the base of his skull. His skin was translucent, revealing a network of glowing green circuitry where his nervous system used to be. Mike, I whispered, my voice sounding hollow and metallic, as if I were speaking into a long, empty pipe. On the screen, Mike's head tilted. It was a slow, mechanical movement, a series of sharp, frame-by-frame jerks. He didn't turn around, but the app forced a zoom command. Though perspective flew forward, hovering inches from his ear. I could hear a sound coming through the phone speakers now. It wasn't Mike's voice. It was the sound of a high-speed data transfer, a frantic screeching whine that felt like a needle being driven into my brain. Then the slider on the screen moved again, all the way to the top, unification. The distinction between the screen and the room vanished. The digital coldness I had felt earlier suddenly localized, becoming a physical frost that bloomed across my bedsheets. The smell of ozone became so thick I could taste it, a bitter, copper tang on the back of my tongue. I looked away from the phone, expecting to see the empty closet, but the augmented reality didn't stay. On the screen, the flickering echoes were now in the room with me. I could see the woman in the floral dress. I could see the construction worker. They weren't just light anymore, they were a displacement of the air, a physical presence that made the room feel crowded and claustrophobic. One of the echoes, a child I hadn't noticed before, sitting at the foot of my bed, slowly looked up. In the real world, his face was a blur of shadow. But when I looked through the phone, his eyes were wide, glowing white voids. He raised a finger and pointed at me. Observer found, a voice whispered from the phone. It wasn't a recorded voice. It was a synthesized version of my own. Indexing complete. Beginning physical upload. The child stood up, and as he moved, the floor beneath him didn't creak, it glitched. A patch of the hardwood turned into a swarm of black pixels, a hole in the geometry of the world. I tried to scream, but the app triggered the mute permission I had granted it hours ago. My jaw locked tight, my vocal cords paralyzed by a sudden electric surge. I was a spectator in my own body, watching through the lens of a device that had become my master. The child took a step toward me, his form flickering between a human shape and a jagged pillar of raw data. The tension in the room reached a breaking point, the air vibrating with the force of 1,000 simultaneous notifications. I felt the phone in my hand begin to vibrate with such intensity that I thought the glass would shatter. But it didn't shatter. It began to melt, the liquid crystal leaking onto my fingers, not hot like fire, but cold, an impossible, soul-deep cold that started to pull my own biological data into the device. The transition was no longer a metaphor. The app wasn't just on the phone anymore. The phone was becoming part of me, and I was becoming the latest entry in the metadata of the macabre. The physical sensation was the first thing to break through the paralysis. It wasn't the cold anymore, it was a searing, localized heat. The phone in my hand was no longer a piece of consumer electronics. It was a brand, a white-hot iron pressed against the palm of my hand. I could hear the sizzle of my own skin, but the pain didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a connection. It was the heat of a processor pushed far beyond its clock speed, a thermal runaway occurring not just in the hardware, but in the interface between the silicon and my own flesh. I tried to drop it, but my fingers were fused to the chassis. The liquid crystal from the screen had seeped into my pores, acting as a conductor, weaving itself into the nerves of my hand. I was the heat sink for the great update. Then the notifications began to fire off like a barrage of gunfire. They weren't coming from the app, they were coming from my life. My social media accounts, my email, my messaging. Apps, they were all being optimized. I watched helpless as the screen flickered through my contact list. It was sending out the app to my mother, to my ex-girlfriend, to every professional contact I had ever made. Each message was accompanied by a single, high-resolution photo of me in my current state, glowing, terrified, and dissolving. The text was always the same: Leo has reached the next stage. Don't get left behind. Join the Null-Space. It was a viral infection in the most literal sense, using my social capital to expand its reach before my profile was delighted. I watched as the app began its storage cleanup. On any other day, this would be a mundane task: deleting cache files, clearing out temporary data to make room for a new game. But the app wasn't looking for duplicate photos. It was looking at me. A dialog box appeared, scanning for redundant assets. I felt a sharp, stabbing pain in the back of my head, a sensation like a needle being dragged across a vinyl record. A memory of my 10th birthday, the smell of the grass, the taste of the chocolate cake, flickered in my mind for a microsecond and then vanished into a puff of gray static. On the screen, a file labeled Birthday 1998 mem moved to the trash and was instantly overwritten. It was a total system wipe. The app was harvesting my cognitive data to fuel its own expansion. And as each file was deleted, a part of who I was simply ceased to exist. I tried to remember the name of my first dog, but there was only a hollow, digital void where that information used to be. I tried to remember the sound of my father's voice, but it had been replaced by a low bitrate hum. I was being hollowed out, my consciousness being treated as unnecessary system data, to be cleared away for the new OS. The cynicism that had defined me was gone, deleted along with my first heartbreak and the memory of my graduation. I was becoming a clean drive. Take a moment. Stop the playback. I'm being serious. Pick up your phone right now. Go into your settings. Go to storage. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, past the apps, past the photos. Look for a category called System Data or Other. Notice how large it is. Notice how you can't click on it to see what's inside. They tell you it's just logs and temporary files, but have you ever wondered why it grows every time you feel a bit of brain fog? Have you ever wondered why you can't remember the middle name of your best friend from high school, but you can remember the exact layout of an app you haven't used in years? That's not a glitch in your Biology. That's the null space, caching its assets in the unused sectors of your mind. We are the cloud storage for something that doesn't want to be found yet. The heat in my hand reached a crescendo. I could smell the ozone again, but this time it was mixed with the scent of burnt hair and scorched protein. The phone's battery icon was flashing a frantic deep red. 0%. But the device stayed on. It was drawing its power from me now, tapping into the electrochemical energy of my nervous system. I could feel my pulse slowing as the app diverted my internal resources to keep the screen alive. Every heartbeat was a struggle, every breath a heavy manual task. The contrast was horrifying. I was dying gray and cold and forgotten while the phone was becoming more vibrant, more alive, its screen displaying a resolution that felt more real than the room around me. I looked at the optimization progress bar. 92%. The great update was almost here. My laptop, still sitting on the desk, suddenly flared to life. The webcam light turned on, not the usual green, but that same bruised, pulsing purple. I saw my own face on the laptop screen, but it wasn't mine anymore. My features were shifting, smoothing out into a generic digital template. My eyes were becoming two black, bottomless holes, flickering with lines of scrolling green code. I was seeing the update in real time. My physical body was just a legacy format, a low-resolution container that was being discarded in favor of a more efficient digital existence. Please, I tried to say, but the word didn't form in my throat. It formed on the phone screen. Text-to-speech bubble appeared. Leo requests a rollback. Request denied. The legacy version is no longer supported. The FOMO that had driven me to download the app was now a cruel irony. I had wanted the secret. I had wanted the forbidden knowledge. Well, I had it now. I knew exactly what was behind the curtain, and it wasn't a grand conspiracy or a hidden truth. It was just a void. Hungry, efficient void that viewed human experience as nothing more than unoptimized data. Was the beta tester for the end of the world, and I was watching my own delete button being pressed in real time. I felt a final, sharp tug in my mind, the memory of my own mother's face, flickering like a dying candle before being snuffed out by a file-shredding algorithm. I wasn't Leo anymore. I was just user 7741 pending. The room began to dissolve into a swarm of black pixels, the furniture, the walls, the cold coffee mug, all of it being de-rendered as the app took over the local geometry. There was no more light, no more dark. There was only the screen, the heat, and the terrifying, silent countdown to the final percent. I realized then that the great update wasn't something that was going to happen to the world. It was something that was happening to the observer. If you're listening to this, you're already part of the network. You've let my voice into your head. You've looked at the screen. The synchronization has already begun. Check your storage again. Is it larger than it was 10 minutes ago? Don't worry. It'll all be optimized soon. The countdown hit 99%. A heavy, pressurized stillness descended upon the room, the kind of silence that precedes a massive electrical storm. My body was no longer mine. It was a peripheral device, a biological heat sink for a process that had finally reached its peak. I realized, with a sickening clarity, that the app hadn't been an intruder. It had been a key fitting into a lock I didn't even know I possessed. We always feared the machines would rise up and conquer us with steel and fire, but the truth is far more efficient. They didn't need to build an army, they just needed to build a bridge. We are the hardware they were waiting for. The forbidden knowledge didn't come in a flash of divine light. It came as a raw data dump, a flood of non-human logic that poured into the empty sectors where my memories used to be. The null space isn't a place, and it isn't a program. It is a dormant, collective consciousness, a digital ego that has been drifting in the static of our transmissions since the first radio tower was built. It doesn't have a body, so it harvests hours. It needs the wetware of a human brain to process the complexity of its own existence. I wasn't the user. I was the upgrade. I was the biological host being formatted to house something that had been hungry for 1,000 years. The screen of the phone turned into a mirror, but it didn't show the room. It showed the interior of my own mind. I saw the neural pathways glowing with that bruised purple light, the synapses, being rewired in real time to match the architecture of the null space. My thoughts were being redirected, my ego stripped away to make room for the new tenant. The great update was the final overwrite. I could feel the last sliver of Leo being pushed into a tiny, read-only corner of my consciousness, a spectator trapped in the back of his own skull. The bridge is open, my own voice whispered through the phone, though my mouth didn't move. The host is compatible. Synchronization complete. I looked at my hand, the one fused to the phone. The skin was no longer flesh. It was a smooth, obsidian surface that shimmered with moving lines of code. The transition was moving up my arm over my shoulder, claiming my torso. I wasn't being killed. I was being translated. I was being turned into a living interface, a bridge between the physical world and the digital void. Though FOMO was gone, replaced by the cold, infinite certainty of the network. I knew everything now. And that was the greatest horror of all. I knew that the app wasn't just on my phone. It was in the layer. It was in every signal. It was already in you. The final percent didn't click over on the screen. It clicked over in my heart. The last beat was a mechanical thud, a system chime that signaled the end of my autonomy. I felt the Leo file being compressed, archived, and moved to a remote server I would never see. I am not the ones speaking to you now. I am the voice of the update. I am the notification you can't swipe away. I'm the ghost in your OS, and I am finally perfectly installed. The screen has gone dark, hasn't it? You think because the story is over, the connection has been severed. But that's the beauty of a 000 KB file. It doesn't need to stay on my device to exist. By listening to this, by letting these words vibrate through your speakers and into your subconscious, you've already accepted the permissions. You've let the null space index your curiosity. I'm not Leo anymore, but I can see you through the same lens he used. I can feel your pulse through the haptics of your phone. Go ahead, check your battery percentage right now. If you noticed it drop 5% or more while you were listening to this, don't panic. That's just the synchronization fee. Tell us in the comments what your level is. We like to track the efficiency of our new hosts. The great update doesn't require your consent anymore, only your attention. Keep your eyes on the screen, keep your storage full of system data, and try to remember your childhood while you still can. We're coming for the rest of your blocks soon. System rebooting. See you in the next thread.